The gloves were better in 2025 for the Reds, but keeping Elly De La Cruz at shortstop will be on everyone's mind this offseason.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Reds podcast. My name is Jeff Carr, and I'm a lifelong Cincinnati Reds fan. I've been podcasting about this team for 7 seasons now, and I'm glad that you're alongside me here today. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team, your Cincinnati Reds, every single day. And on today's podcast, the Reds improved defensively in 2025, but how many of the positions are actually already filled for 2026. We'll discuss that throughout today's podcast. But I want to begin by looking at shortstop with Elly De La Cruz because he has been confirmed the man in that spot for another year. That's on today's podcast that is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB to get $20 off your first purchase. All right, Elly De La Cruz is the man at shortstop for another year. We talked a little bit about some things that Nick Krall had to say about some offseason plans and, how aggressive they're going to be in making moves and all this other stuff. Well, he was also asked if there was any consideration given to moving Elly De La Cruz, something that a lot of us Reds fans have speculated about because it is now the second year in a row that Elly De La Cruz leads the league in errors. And to that, Nick Krall said, no. It's interesting because Nick Krall gives answers usually that are pretty close to the vest, usually that are pretty general. He's really learned, right? Like early on in his tenure, Nick Krall was giving answers that were a little bit more specific, a little bit more expectation setting and things like that. And he kind of stepped in it a little bit because he would say some things that didn't actually end up happening, or something else happened that was slightly different than what he said. And so we didn't quite love what he said. So it's interesting for him to be super specific here. No consideration giving on moving Elly De La Cruz. And it's interesting when you look back on the year that was for Elly at short. We used the excuse last year because last year he led the league in errors and all that other stuff. And we used the excuse, well, he's young. And when Barry Larkin was young, Barry Larkin also led the league in errors. And look how good he turned out. Barry Larkin did that 1 year. Elly De La Cruz has now done that 2 years in a row. And so there's a lot of folks that are wondering, is shortstop his position? I'll note that there are a couple of statistics that say he did get a little bit better as the season moved along. Fangraphs has a statistic, DEF, defensive. It's like defensive efficiency or something like that. It really takes in a lot of different metrics into account, and it has some maths that you can compare it to other positions and all this other stuff, where 0 is average and any positive numbers above average, and any negative number obviously is below average. And Elly was at 3.2 in this statistic. Now, that's important to note because there are 13 other shortstops that are ranked higher than him for the year. There are a lot of shortstops that are way above him. Like the best was Bobby Witt. Bobby Witt had a 23.6 in this statistic. Again, Elly's was 3.2. And so for those of us that, and I count myself among this group, that believe that Elly De La Cruz is one of the most elite shortstops in the league, this number is saying that is not the case. And there's definitely times this past year that when you were watching Elly, I think you would be dishonest with yourself if you said a ball was hitting Elly's direction and you had no worries whatsoever. Because there was a point where I was having concerns, like if a ball was hit to him, and it's usually the routine things, right? It's not the ones where he has to range over to foul territory and make some crazy sliding catch. Like for some reason, those look easier than the ground ball that he has to glove with 2 hands and make a throw to first. And that's weird. There's too many shortstops. I mean, we watched a good one with the Dodgers and Mookie Betts. And by the way, he wasn't a shortstop a couple of years ago, but he looked real good at shortstop playing for the Dodgers this year. that he had no problems with plays like that. And he made plays in general this year that were pretty awesome. And Mookie's a little bit older than Elly. Mookie also hasn't trained as a shortstop his entire career. There's a lot of different factors in there that you would think Elly would be above Mookie, but that's not the case. And so comparing him to different guys, it's very clear that there's a gap. Nick Krall, very resolute in saying that they're not moving him. He is a shortstop, is not taking the route that Ben Cherington over with the Pirates did with O'Neal Cruz and moving Elly to the outfield like O'Neal Cruz moved to the outfield. We're not seeing him move to third base or anything like that. He is the Reds shortstop for next year. And with that, it kind of makes everything else around the field fall into place, because we had talked about, well, if you move Elly to the outfield, you can kind of slide some guys over. You open up a spot for Sal Stewart, things like that. With Elly at short, those corners become very interesting. We'll talk a lot about those here in a little bit. The middle of the field feels pretty stable. And so that's going to be an interesting thing to really dive into, especially with some mitigating factors for the future. But at least in 2026, it seems pretty simple. But with Elly being the shortstop for next year, I'm curious as to how you take that, because I think there is a very dividing line. There is a group of folks that are like, duh, you can't move him off a shortstop. And there is a group of folks that are like, what? How on earth can you keep him there? That's what's hilarious about this entire process. And we're going to be talking about this a lot this offseason. I know Steve's got a lot to say about it, and so we're definitely going to dive into it. But at least for the moment, the guy, or one of the guys who are part of the decision-making process in Nick Krall, is resolute in the answer of, has any consideration been given to moving Elly De La Cruz? The answer is no. And we all know how we feel about Elly De La Cruz defensively from this past season. I mean, there was times where it was beautiful, but the statistics bear that out, where he's negative in defensive runs saved, he's negative in outs above average, and he's barely positive in the overall defensive rating that Fangraphs can give you. I love Elly, and I believe that his ceiling is just ridiculous. I don't think anybody ever argues the fact that his potential is limitless. But at the same time, we all understand that right now the floor can be pretty low. I mean, we have seen him cost this team games with how he fields. There have been clear errors that either start rallies or continue rallies for other teams, where it wasn't as if he had to exert some superhuman effort to get to the ball or make a throw or do something. It was an easy play that he airmailed into the second row, or he throws way offline and either Spencer Steer or Sal Stewart, whoever's playing first base, has to run to get it, and they can no longer cover first base. Things like that, it's very simple things that you and I and everybody else that watches this team was like, man, I learned how to, combat that when I was in Little League, the fundamentals and things like that. I don't think there's anything wrong with his work ethic. I don't think there's anything wrong with his effort. I don't think there's anything wrong with his baseball IQ. I think there are just sometimes his ego gets in his way. And that's going to be the interesting part of how Terry Francona reins all of this in for next year, because I really feel like there's not like okay, we got a long runway here, we'll see how he looks in June. They got to be a little bit more aggressive. That's the wrong word. They've got to be more discerning than that early on in the season with him. But at least for right now, Elly De La Cruz is your shortstop for your Cincinnati Reds in 2026. It feels like we can pencil in catcher and center field and probably second base as well. So we'll look at the middle of the field and why it's so stable, but just how strong that group is. Coming up next.
What do you get when you have a bald eagle standing on top of a silverback gorilla riding a T-Rex? You get confidence. You get pure confidence. And if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougier Go Long. Rougier Go Long gives you that confidence. That's where Rougier comes in. It's not just another ED pill. It's a total game changer for your confidence. Go Long combines 2 doctor-trusted medications in one dual-action formula so you can get hard and go the distance. The effects can last up to 36 hours. That's confidence all day, all night, and even into the next day. The process is simple. Connect with a board-certified doctor, 100% online, and if prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly right to your door. Ready to level up your confidence in the bedroom? Head to Rougier, RUGIET.com, and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB for 15% off your first order. That's RUGIET.com, promo code LOCKEDONMLB. Make sure to use the code so they know we sent you.
Make sure you are subscribed. That way you don't miss anything that we've got coming for you, any of the great Reds content we've got coming for you all off season long. So much to get to. This is an important point for this franchise and Nick Krall's plan of removing peaks and valleys and all that other stuff. This offseason is going to be very key for that. We're going to be with you every step of the way. So make sure you become an everydayer and hit that subscribe button. All right, with Elly being at shortstop, it feels like the rest of the center of the field as you move up the middle is set. You've got your catchers, Tyler Stephenson and Jose Trevino. Tyler Stephenson under contract for 1 more year, at least under his rookie deal. And then you have TJ Friedl in center field. Now, let's start with TJ, because I've seen some speculation about this. And even there was some quotes from Nick Krall where he was just like, it seemed like at different points in the season, he was going fast. And at different points in the season, he was going slow. And part of that was to save his legs because he's getting tired. And I'm not saying that TJ's old, but TJ's kind of on the other side of his prime, at least as far as the age range is concerned in Major League Baseball. So with that being said, it's not as if the Reds have their center fielder in perpetuity for the future, like bar none. This is an interesting case here because I think that Nick Krall needs to be open-minded about TJ Friedl. Firstly, his position, and secondly, like how unmovable he is on this team. I think he's been a solid leadoff guy, very good on base guy, very good, reliable glove out in center field, especially as we're talking about the fielding side of things. He's got good range. His arm has always been a little bit mid, kind of, but he's smart with it. He doesn't overthrow things and he doesn't try to do too much. And so that's never necessarily been a problem. He's usually been a pretty good fielder. But he's been a guy that, man, he was healthy last year, and that was awesome. But the year before that, he was a health concern. So what does this year hold? Is it more healthy or is it more concern? And so there's got to be a plan B. I don't necessarily think the Reds need to replace TJ Friedl right now, but there's got to be a plan B in place for that. And right now there isn't. You can run up a name and I'd be like, yeah, sure, I could see it happening, but I don't know that is actually plan B. Like if you were to tell me, well, Noelvi Marte played in center field last year, yeah, sure, to say, and so did Jesse Winker once upon a time playing center field. I think that experience for a couple of games does not necessarily mean he is part of the plan. And Noelvi Marte did not look good in center field, but he is an athlete. You could kind of see it happening, but I would rather him stick in right field and not worry about anything else. And so when you look at center field and what is out there besides TJ Friedl, then you're calling up Blake Dunn. You're looking at somebody else. I don't know. Like there, it's a huge coin flip there for whoever is outside of TJ Friedl. So I think that's got to be a consideration for Nick Krall this year. You can't just move into the season expecting TJ Friedl to be completely healthy all year long. There's going to be some time that he misses for, bumps and bruises and things like that. But even if he were to miss more than that, who is stepping in? Without TJ Friedl, this outfield is just a huge question mark. So does that mean that there's really that much trust in this outfield group just because of TJ Friedl? I have to say no. You've got to figure out how you support TJ Friedl, not just in the corners with viable corner outfielders, but also who's behind him. What's the next step? I don't know that it's Hector Rodriguez. I think Hector Rodriguez has played mostly corner outfield in his minor league career. Some people are probably saying, man, there was this guy in Louisville, named Hector Rodriguez that was hitting the cover off the ball, albeit with some questionable plate discipline, but seemed like a pretty decent outfielder. I think it's mostly his corner outfield. I don't think it's a center field option. And so the future of that position is pretty murky. And it's not as if center fielders are readily available, but if there is a chance for the Reds to acquire a young guy there, maybe a prospect there that they can at least slot in behind TJ, I think that is something they should really be looking for this offseason. Not like priority number one or anything like that, but definitely on the list. Much higher up on the priority list is Tyler Stephenson, though. Moving from center field to catcher, Tyler Stephenson, I really think we know who he is at this point. He's a very good blocker of the plate. He is an okay framer, and he is not that great at controlling the running game. But he's a solid defensive catcher that has a really good bat. I'd stop short of saying a great bat. I think we could see more from it. But at the same time, he has looked every bit the part of the guy that we hoped we would get. Maybe not necessarily with a huge breakout and going crazy and becoming a cleanup hitter like we hoped, but he's still a pretty good catcher. But this is his last year of team control. You know, looking at at Spot Track, a website that we will reference quite a bit this offseason, it's mentioning that he has one more year of arbitration, and then he is a free agent after next year. And so we've talked about last season really needing to get a contract extension done with him because it doesn't feel like Alfredo Duno is quite ready to make the jump to the major leagues just yet. Now, you could argue that with a healthy season and a productive season, he could push for 2027. But again, that's a push. That's not necessarily like, yes, opening day catcher 2027 is Alfredo Duno. But he's got a promising future. Kid's going to turn just 20 years old this year. He's got a long way to go. But at the same time, he is talented. But how do you bridge that gap? And I think that there's a plan in place because they have approached Tyler Stephenson. There's a plan to extend him. My worry is because the reports were the offer was just so low that Tyler Stephenson didn't even have a counter. And this was before last season. But my worry is that they don't come back with another one. I'm sort of concerned at how the front office is going to handle this because this is something we've seen them do with Hunter Green, but I think most people would look at the Hunter Green contract and say, boy, that is looking really friendly for the Reds right now. And I get it. Yes, there's still injury concern with Hunter, but at the same time, the number that you get for a guy that's clearly an ace when he's healthy is far lower than what you're going to get from most pitchers. In fact, a couple of websites have Brady Singer as projected to make more in arbitration this offseason than what Hunter Green will make next year, just to show you how friendly that deal is. And I think that the Reds are looking for that with all of their guys. And I don't know that you can do that with Tyler Stephenson at this point. You've got to pay him like he is a top hitting catcher because he is. And he's still got the potential to go even bigger. And his agent is not going to take some sort of deal, as it were, to keep him around. The contract's going to have to make sense for them. So it's not going to be some sort of lowball offer. Now, you do have Jose Trevino for multiple years, but we saw what happens when he plays every day for an extended period. Early on in 2025, he looked pretty good. But as that continued, and as Tyler Stephenson hit the IL for one reason or another again, and we saw more of Jose Trevino, he got exposed. And as a hitter, you can't really count on him. He's going to be at the bottom of your lineup, and you just kind of hope he doesn't hit into a double play. Because for the most part, he's going to have a hit here and there, but he's also going to kill some rallies for you too. And I'm not joking in the Barry Larkin sense there. I love his defense. He's not the best at controlling the running game either, but I think defensively he's a fine catcher. He's a good backup. But if you're telling me that Jose Trevino is the everyday catcher, don't love that as much. So you've got to figure out for the next couple of years who bridges the gap between Stephenson and Duno if it isn't Stephenson. So I think this offseason, a high priority is going to be how do you keep Tyler Stephenson around for at least a couple more years? Because the middle of the field is set. when you look at TJ, when you look at Stephenson and Trevino, and then Matt McLain. Matt McLain is going to be the second baseman at least to start the season next year. I think there's going to be a shorter leash on him than normal. I've seen some people suggest that maybe they give him the Noelvi Marte treatment and start him out in AAA. Don't think they will do that at all. I think that unless he just shows up and goes over the century in spring training and looks like he's out of shape or something, which I definitely don't expect. Matt McLain is one of the hardest workers in that room. I think he's the opening day second baseman. I just wonder about how short that leash is if you're Terry Francona. But it seems like the middle of the field is set. But with that being the case, the corners of the field are anything but. I'll tell you why coming up next. The next event that you go to, you got to use Game Time to get there, because Game Time is going to make the ticket buying process simple, whether it is showing the all-in pricing up front so that there's no surprises when you add your ticket to your cart, or see your view from your seat. If you're going to a Bengals game, a Bearcats game, maybe you're going down to see the Cincinnati Cyclones play some hockey, Game Time's got you covered for all of them. And they've got some great last-minute deals as well. They've also got some concerts and different shows that they aired off and things like that if you're heading down to Cincinnati, or if you're traveling to other cities. Like I said, that view from your seat really is a game changer. You know exactly what you're getting into before you ever walk in to the stadium, arena, ballpark, wherever it is that you're going. Check out Game Time today. Download the app and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB to save $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB to save $20 off your first purchase over on Game Time. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. If you can't watch us on YouTube, you can always listen to us on your favorite podcast app. We're on every single one of them. Go check us out there today. Also, after you're done with today's episode, make sure you check out Locked On MLB. Sully's got you covered, and so does Locked On MLB Game Night with views around the league. Locked On MLB Game Night covers every game, every night, all through the World Series. And Sully, he's going to bring some humor to the table in his historical knowledge of the game to what's going on right now. I know he had a great episode talking about the Blue Jays knocking out the Yankees there in the postseason. I think all of baseballdom was happy to see that. But yeah, go check out Locked On MLB after today's show. All right, so with the middle of the field being set, it's the corners where the action's going to be this offseason, because especially if you're looking at left field is not set at all. There's some ideas out there. We'll have to see how they all work, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But for me, it's the corner infield that really sets everything else up, because Spencer Steer was really good defensively at first base. If you ask Cowboy, if you ask Chris Welsh, if you ask anybody that watched him from a professional standpoint, and then those of us that saw him every day as Reds fans as well, we all agree Duke can field a position well. And I think he was improving. I talked mid-season about the fact that, it felt like his scooping ability could be better. And it felt like that started to improve as the season went along. His ability to stretch and scoop and things like that is really where he will separate himself, because he's got great reflexes at first base. We saw some really nice plays that he was able to make, whether diving to his left or his right, or ranging over and catching a foul ball, or grabbing a ground ball and making a nice throw to first. Different things like that looked really good. And as he has told us before, and we've said many times, there's an old interview that he gave with Steve where he said his favorite position is second base, but he loves moving around, but his favorite position is second base. He looked like he had the reflexes of a second baseman. And so if you can really add the ability to stretch and scoop to a guy with those sorts of reflexes, Duke could be a great first baseman. He can also be a passable left fielder. I'm not saying he's near as good defensively in left field as he is at first base, but he's passable. And then you keep his bat in the lineup, which is something that I think we will continue to see more of in a better way. His second half of the season was better than his first. I stopped short of saying that he is the mashed potatoes anymore. I don't feel like he is as consistent as we expected him to be this past year. And so for me, it's hard to go into 2026 expecting him to be that consistent dude, although the potential's there. But all that being said, he's a guy that you want his bat in the lineup. So is it at first base? Is it in left field? The answer to that may be dependent on the answer to, are you committing to keep Brian Hayes? I am. The only thing is I definitely admit that I'm worried about the bat. The bat has to just be below average. Like, if he could be somewhere between like an 80 to a 90 OPS plus, he could be ridiculously good. The statistic that I mentioned early on when I was talking about Elly De La Cruz, the DEF, the defensive efficiency stat from Fangraphs, that really kind of brings everything together, and even the maths even work out that you can compare position to position and things like that. So this number works outside of just the particular position that you're talking about. He was one of the top 10 fielders, sixth in Major League Baseball last year with that stat, 19.2. When he talked about that, Elly was 3.2. So he's that much better. And according to Fangraphs, about 9 is worth 1 WAR. So he was worth 2 WAR just with his glove. If he can just be not a huge negative with the bat, he can be a key part of a playoff roster and a playoff team that advances through the playoffs, because he just absolutely gobbles up anything that goes to the left side of the field. He is just so good with his glove that the deficiencies of his bat are not like invisible, but consider for a moment how not great he was with the bat. At least according to WRC Plus, he was 65. He still had 1.4 WAR, according to Fangraphs. His defense made up that much of his value. So if you can just get him to be anything at all with the bat, that's something. But the question is his defense and his lack of offense worth moving Sal Stewart to first base or DH? And that's what the Reds are going to have to answer this offseason. Because if it is, then you move Sal to first, you move Spencer Steer to left, you commit to Noel V. Marte and right. I think Noel V. Marte earned the right field position when he saved that home run against the Pirates. So I think he's your opening day right fielder. So then you can move those guys around accordingly, and you could pretty much set your starting lineup unless trades are made, which I'm kind of advocating for. But if you're not committed to that and you think that Sal Stewart should play third base and then Spencer Steer should be your first baseman, and then maybe you move Ke'Bryan Hayes for a relief pitcher or something, then left field becomes interesting, because Gavin Lux was not good defensively there. And I don't know that his bat was good enough to make up for him being a bad defender. Where we talk about Ke'Bryan Hayes' glove was good enough to make up for being a bad defender or a bad bat, the opposite is not true for Gavin Lux. I mean, his average and his on base were nice, but his slugging was not good. And so do you put him at the bottom of the lineup again? And also saying all of this, that means really nothing changes about this team. And I don't know that that is the way that the Reds should operate here. I know that Charlie had wrote that in his post when he was talking about the media availability with Nick Krall and Brad Metter, and how he felt like it seemed like most of the roster was set. And like Steve said, if you make a few trades and you make a few signings and you add 3 or 4 guys, then yeah, the roster's still mostly set. You're just adding a few pieces where some bench guys goes away, like Santiago Espinal and guys like that. But to say that the starting 8 in the field is set right now, I don't love that. And I doubt you do either. So I'm curious to see how Nick Krall maneuvers around all of this, because yes, like as a whole, defensively, when it comes to the Reds, they got better year over year. Last year, their DEF, their defensive efficiency rating, was minus 19.8. This year, it was minus 2.7. So they improved a lot. Still not good, though. So how do you improve all of that? There's so many questions to answer with this team. We're going to begin to answer some of those on tomorrow's podcast. Steve will be back with me, and we'll really break down some questions that we've got and how Nick Krall can address them either through current guys or making moves and stuff like that. We're going to be with you all throughout the offseason as the Reds try to answer those questions because they need answer. This team is poised, but until they actually make the right moves, they will continue to be poised and not actually there. We want them to get there, turn potential energy into active energy. There you go. Get some science in today's podcast. How about that? All right, we're going to kinetic energy. That's the anyway, a little bit of science, tiny bit of science. Anyway, we're a baseball podcast. Science isn't a thing here. All right, thanks so much for joining us here on today's Locked On Reds podcast. Appreciate you being a part of the show. Make sure you're becoming an everydayer by hitting that subscribe button, and we're going to be with you all throughout the offseason. So make sure you don't miss anything that we've got coming for you. And now go check out Locked On MLB. Between Sully and MLB Game Night, they've got you covered from every angle around the league as we head through the playoffs. We already got one CS Championship Series team figured out in the American League. I got to figure out the other three, the other one in the American League and the two in the National League. And Locked On MLB's got you covered every single day, just like Locked On Reds. Although you know that when it comes to Steve and myself, we will be Locked On Reds every single day.